welcome to the Abiding CEO podcast where faith meets business. I'm your host, Betsy Mejias, trauma therapist and business coach. And today is a special day. Today we have Lea Turner with us, and she's just going to share how she juggled multiple things when life was happening, and she still had to take care of five kids while helping her mother through a difficult time. But I'm not going to tell her story for her. Sorry, I get carried away. But I am going to let Lea introduce herself. Lea, say hi.
Hi, thank you, Betsy, for having me on. I'm so excited to talk with you. Yes, I'm Lea Turner. I have five children. My oldest has launched out of the home, so he's 20. And then I have an 18-year-old just about to graduate next week. I have a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and then we have the baby who's 7. I have three, the oldest three are biological, the two youngest are adopted. I live in Mississippi with my husband, who's an OBGYN. And I'm just excited to be here. I think that's all.
Okay. Well, we're glad to have you. And you wear multiple hats on the business front. You were telling me you're an author, speaker, coach. Tell us a little bit about that and the topics that you explore.
Yes, I do wear many hats these days. So I just finished my book, The Freedom to Feel. It's my very first book that I wrote, and it's in pre-orders now. And I mostly talk on grief and trauma because of what we've walked through as a family and just trying to be vulnerable for other people. I really speak to moms who are in the trenches of struggling with their grief and their trauma and just helping them to find hope and see that God is always present with them. I am a new grief coach. I'm excited to start that part of my business. And I think that's it.
Okay, that's plenty. Now, you shared several events that have taken place and even how these events have affected your business and just juggling your personal and professional life. Since you're grief coaching and not enjoy, like we don't enjoy trauma, we enjoy the byproduct, the adaptive
Yeah,
growth, the healing. You get to come
yeah,
alongside people in that journey. So you enjoy the outcome of it.
I do,
But
yes.
take us to a time where you were experiencing that grief and trauma and how you overcame.
Okay. In the year 2020, my dad had just passed away in 2019. Then, we were in COVID and quarantine, and then my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And in July of 2020 was really when God just he was so present, but I was just so shooken by the whole thing. But I was driving home with my mom from an hour away from her doctor's appointment, and I get a call from my daughter, who's 14 at the time. She was home with our three youngest, babysitting them, and she said, "Mom, the house is on fire." And as a mom, you're like, what's burning? Turn it off. Like, what do you mean? Is it, the stove, the kitchen? I was trying to figure out what was happening. And she said, "No, Mom, the house is on fire. It's completely on fire." And so I quickly call my neighbor, and she runs over there with 2 fire extinguishers to put out the fire. And she called me and she said, "Leah, the house is gone." And that that was the very, very difficult moment. I mean, it was I couldn't get home. My kids were sitting or standing waiting for their dad to get home from work. And so navigating when I was grieving with my dad's death, I was grieving it and navigating basically my own grief at that time. But then when the fire happened, I was now navigating my own grief and trauma and my kids. And it was very challenging, but God was so present. And just looking back, He just really carried us all through it.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Thinking through a moment of where he carried you through it, what did that look like? What did that feel like?
I had a very strong foundation in the Lord. So all the years of building my foundation on the Lord was for those moments, because I had even trouble reading the word. I started listening to it. I listened to it at night in bed, because when you're in grief and trauma, you can't even process anything. It's so
Yeah.
difficult. So I would listen to the word, but I became really honest with him because I felt like he was distant, and I couldn't pinpoint why. I felt his presence, but then there was this one day I was driving and I was telling him my frustrations of just everything that was happening, and there was a song playing, and it's the repeated chorus is, he is good, he is good, he is good. I'm not a good singer, so I won't sing
It's
it for you.
okay. It's okay.
I said to him, you are not good. You are not good to me. You are not good to my children. You are not good. And it felt like something broke. Like he was waiting for me to say that to him. And I just had an unbelievable peace after that. And I mean, life carried on, life was the same, but this peace that I was like, he's there. He's
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
And he's a God that draws near to our brokenness. He's not a God that is far from us, and he wants us to be open and honest, just like we are open and honest with our own dads, and how we want our children to be with us. Like I want my children to say, Mom, you're not being fair, because then I know their heart and we can build from there. And of course I know God is good, but in that moment he didn't feel good.
Yeah.
It didn't feel good at all.
Yeah.
So that's a moment that I felt like he was really there. He was really there.
Thank you for being just so transparent and vulnerable. And you're right. He already knows.
Yeah.
But when you have that level of intimacy with someone,
Yeah.
especially your Heavenly Father,
Hmm.
He wants you to come to Him.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I do want to go back and just validate and expand a little bit on was that trauma brain, right? When something happens and literally it's like your executive function, your frontal lobe shuts down.
Hmm.
So you're in survival mode, fight, flight, or freeze. I am really grateful that your daughter at 13, 14 was
14.
so proactive.
It
And
was it was the Lord. I mean, it was the Lord.
yeah,
It
even
was the
just
Lord.
that alone. So that
Yeah.
affects how different people handle trauma. Some of us fight, flight, freeze, take action. Like it's
Hmm.
it's okay. And also it's okay to process or all of a sudden, especially grieving. I'm sure you studied, right? The stages,
Hmm.
but they don't
No.
always go in order. Everybody
Mhm.
thinks they're gonna go first you get angry, then you deny, then you bark. No, no, no. You
No.
can flip-flop at any
Mhm.
moment. You could be close
Yeah.
to healing and spin right back into bargaining.
And it's all
But
okay.
yeah, and that's okay because eventually you will get out.
Hmm. Mm.
And the other thing I want to highlight that resonated was worship.
Mm.
How a song
Mhm. Mhm.
can minister to you.
Mhm.
I've done that, right? You play a
Mhm.
song. For me, a few years ago during the tough season was The Story I'll Tell.
Mm. Yeah.
That one really encouraged me. And I remember
Yeah.
putting that on repeat and just singing along.
Mhm.
Because like you, I can't sing when I'm alone, right? Only when I'm alone or in the car.
Yeah.
But that has contributed to where you are and who you are today.
Mhm.
How has that experience shaped the way you coach?
I'm able to enter in with them, able to hold that space for them to grieve and say that it's okay. I will say it's difficult, and we always want to compare our grief. I get on calls with other grief coaches, and they have lost children and husbands and lots of other relatives, and I want to shrink back and be like, what am I to bring to the table? But then
Mhm,
God reminds me, like, you're bringing something different. You're able to enter into people's grief that is different and unique,
mhm,
because a house fire is different. Addiction, my son went through addiction, that's different. And so I just can't compare my grief. We can't compare our grief. We just we just hold space for other people. And as a coach, that's really just what I love to do, is just be able to be there for someone as a sounding board. Because when you're grieving, there's not many people that can really enter in. They want to be there for you, and our friends and family desire that, but
Mhm.
sometimes just don't know how sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
The ministry of presence, the just,
yes,
like you said,
yeah,
just holding
just
space,
just being there, yeah.
listening without judgment.
Hmm. Yeah,
That goes
not
a
saying
long.
anything, not trying to fix it, just helping them along the journey of towards
Mhm.
healing and hope, and because there's always hope,
Yes.
always.
Okay. How did you find hope? Well, you told me about God speaking to you, but once the fire is over and now you look back, how did you find hope in all of that?
Remembering what God has done. A couple days after the fire, I wrote in my journal, "We are sad, but we will not stay stuck." And I repeated that to
Mm.
the children. I said, "We are sad, but we're not going to stay in this place because of God, because of the hope He's given us." And reminding, in Deuteronomy, God talks to the Israelites about just remember what I did, like, because they're complaining that they're in the wilderness and all that, and he's like, remember what I did, remember when I got you out of slavery, do you remember that time, like, do you remember when, and I would say to the kids, do you remember when God rescued you from the fire, you remember that time, and it was really, I haven't touched on this yet, but that my son then, after the fire, he got addicted to drugs and he was in and out of rehab, and
Yeah.
that was very difficult on my children, and especially my oldest. They're only 20. My daughter, who's the second oldest, they're only 22 months apart. So I watched her remind herself of God's hope when he wasn't doing well, when my son wasn't doing well. She would lay in her bed or go on a drive and listen to worship music.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think I think worship music is one of the greatest things that we have to remind us of hope. We have such anointed people that's just pour out hope to us.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And one of the things that we talked about prior to recording, and you told me that this is something you're comfortable sharing
Mhm,
because you want to shed light, bring hope, and kind of go against this shame around addiction,
mhm.
where shame says, we're a bad person, we're broken, we're flawed, so many things. What were you thinking about yourself as your son is going through this and it's affecting you, it's affecting the family? What was going through your mind?
When it first started, I thought that it was just like a teenage thing. Like, we were just gonna send him to this rehab for a few months and he would be fixed and come home. So I didn't know how, as a mom, I felt shame. I felt like I didn't do enough for him. I wasn't the right mom for him. These are all the reasons why he chose drugs. This is my running dialogue during that time. So we hid it from people, not really hide it. We just didn't share it. And he was in Georgia at the time, actually. So we would say, we're visiting our friends in Georgia. And my daughter said, my friends just keep wondering why we keep visiting our friends in Georgia. Like, it was like we were all just, and I didn't know, it was like you feel the shame as a parent, but you're also trying to protect your child, because I didn't know if he wanted the whole community to know that he had this struggle with addiction. But hiding it put a weight on my husband and I,
Yeah.
because we had like two couples that we shared with during that time and our parents, but other than that, that was it. But the weight of that, like not having a community of people to come around you, was it was a lot for us.
Yeah.
So then when he came home and relapsed, and then we had to find a new rehab, then I was like, I can't do this again alone. I've got to like bring in some of my friends. So I sat down with one of my friends. I texted her. I'm like, can we make lunch longer today? I've got something to share with you. And I talked to her about it, and she didn't even bat an eye. She was like, "What? Why did you not tell me this?" And why would you think I would look at you any different?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
as moms, we think our kids' mistakes are our mistakes. Like we've screwed up as a mom, but it's just not true.
Mhm.
It's just the enemy, and the enemy does everything to keep us alone and
Yeah.
feel shame.
Yeah. And isolate, especially.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I'm gonna ask, and I'm really hoping he's okay now.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's a miracle. It
Yeah.
really is. He is 20 and working, and he's been at the same job for over a year, which is huge. And
Yeah.
he gets up on his own and goes to work. He has a dog that he takes care of. He's doing really, really good. He's wanting to go back to school. He tried college and it was too much at that time, but he's wanting to go back to school now. So we're trying to figure how that will work. And he puts boundaries in place for himself too, which is really, really good. It's amazing. It really
Okay.
is.
What does he say brings him hope?
He is not walking with the Lord currently,
Okay.
um, believes in the Lord, but he just is struggling right now. I think he would say what brings him hope is other his relationship with his family and his friends.
Okay.
Because that's what I see that he leans on the most.
Okay. You guys are just loving him through this.
We are just loving him through it. That's what the Lord told us from the very beginning. Just keep loving on him.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know
Mm,
in addition, this meant you had to put your dreams on the back burner.
yes. Yes.
Tell me about that.
I when when the fire happened, I was in school for becoming a counselor, and I withdrew at that time, and I was doing some speaking and writing and all the things that we do as authors and writers and all that. So I have felt strongly from the Lord to put that down and to focus on the kids and to be their stability. My husband, OBGYN, his schedule's crazy. And I was to be their constant, is what God told me. You need to be their constant. And that's what I did. I tried to make our rental home, homey as much as I could. And just I was there for the kids. It wasn't easy at times because I shared with you earlier, like I felt your friends keep going. They're
Yeah.
not sitting back, So I felt there were times that I felt like, oh, I'm missing out, I'm missing out, I'm missing out. And then God just reminded me, like, no, you're not, no, you're not. Your season will come. And we always feel like a season will be forever, but it won't. It
Yeah.
won't.
It won't be forever, and not everybody's season is the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then
Which is
that's
very hard to do.
right. But then that's the power of
So,
community. Because then now when one of your friends is down and going through one of those, I call them Job season, which is
yeah.
probably an exaggeration. What Job went through is way worse.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah.
we're not always in the same season. And then how do you still maintain that supportive community and, celebrate with those who celebrate and mourn with those who are mourning? It
Yeah.
it can feel like a roller coaster, but it's a necessary one and it's a part of life.
Yes, because we don't know how our actions, like, if we're being disobedient to God, if God's giving you a strong, inkling to stay home, then or do the things or lay things aside for a season for your family, and you disobey that, you don't know what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
that's weighty. That feels weighty. So when I say that, I don't want it to feel weighty because I don't want anyone to feel like
Yeah.
guilt or shame. But when you do lay it aside, like my daughter needed me
Yeah.
so much. And if I was trying to work and build a business and do all that, I wouldn't be able to be her constant because
Mhm.
her anxiety was through the roof. It
Yeah.
was,
Because the world that she perceived as safe was
mhm.
no longer safe. Yeah,
Mm-mm.
that's a reason to be anxious.
Yeah. And then her
Okay.
brother in and out of rehab was very, very, very difficult on her. So she felt like she couldn't trust anyone. She had a lot
Mhm.
of even friends. And for there was a season, I mean, she's a teenager. She didn't go out, she was home
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now you are where you are. So eventually God gave you green light
Mm-hmm.
that to go into this next season.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like and how did you know?
I got an email. I'm in a writing group called Hope Writers. So I got an email saying that they were starting a publishing company off of our Hope Writers called Hope Books, and they were accepting applications to publish a book. So I felt so strongly to submit an application. So I was like, I'm going to submit the application and see what happens, you know. So I submitted it, and I heard back a couple of weeks ago that they accepted my offer. So November, the year's not this past November, the November before that. I don't know what year that was. I signed a contract
22.
with
It's
them.
all
I
good.
know I can't even
Yeah.
22. I signed a contract with Hope Books, and that is when I felt like God gave me the green light to start. And then it just, you say yes to something, then something else comes up, and I have loved it. I've absolutely loved it. I wrote all last year was my writing year, so I wrote every day while the kids were in school, and now this year is launching.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
love it. And then even the publishing company ties into like your theme that speaks to your heart. Because what I keep hearing, even when we
Oh
were
yeah.
talking
You're
before and
right.
now, is hope.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I kind of want to say is right, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
I remember talking about community, a friend, and we used to say that to each other. But sometimes it was like if something good was happening, unfortunately, this too shall pass.
That's right.
Now,
Yeah.
when something bad was happening, oh, this too shall pass, right? Like that
Yeah.
phrase will get you through some stuff.
Yes.
Okay. And also, because you were touching on the idea of obedience and timing, right? And that
Mhm.
brings blessing. And it's not a salvation issue. You can
Mm.
go at your own pace. It might just, you know, not happen the way it could have happened.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to enjoy it. And now you're in a season where you can enjoy the journey
Yeah.
of the writing, the publishing, going back to the speaking and the coaching and finding fulfillment.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one thing I like to ask our guests is what advice do you have for our abiding CEOs?
I heard you ask this. I listened to your podcast. But so when I was having my quiet time this morning, I felt like the Lord wanted me to share this verse. And
Okay.
it's out of Deuteronomy and 8:17, and it says, "You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirm his covenant which he swore to your ancestors as it is today." So always remembering that our abilities, our strengths, all the things that God has us doing is from Him.
Yeah.
And we can spin our wheels and we can make things happen. I heard you talk about it, and you can make things happen, but they're in that striving, that exhausted place. But
Mhm.
when you're abiding in Him and you're remembering that He is the one that's gifted you, it's just so different. So
Yeah.
that's my advice, to remember, continue to remember.
Amen. I have
Mhm.
nothing else to add to that. Where can our audience find you?
I am at Lea Turner, leaturner.com. And on Instagram, I'm Lea J. Turner. And my new book is on Amazon called The Freedom to Feel.
Ooh, the freedom to feel.
Finding God in grief and trauma. Yeah.
Leah, thank you so much for sharing your story, for coming on. I pray and wish you and bless you all the best and permission to feel.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.